to another Wednesday workshop. It's hard to believe that I've been doing so many. So as you come on in the room, be sure to say hello. Let me know how you're doing today, where you're watching from, what the weather's like where you are, what your favorite ice cream flavor is. All right, cool. We got the folks showing up already. So y'all know today's topic is preference versus colorism. One of the most common questions slash debates on the internet. So we'll be jumping into that in just a second. I am your weekly host, Dr. Sarah Webb. This is my favorite time of the week. You all make hump day so much easier getting to chat with you all. So a couple of announcements. I do this every week. So if this is your first time, welcome again. Thank you. These are live every Wednesday at 4 p.m. If you can't stay for the whole live, you have to leave early, you come in late, I do record them for later playback. And that way you can also share them with people who maybe didn't get to tune in. I have a couple of other topics coming up in August that I'm really excited about. We're going to be talking about what is healing, right? Now, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist or a counselor, although some people have assumed I might be. So my, discussion of healing is coming from my own theories of it and how I've implemented it in my life. And as always, it's a discussion. So I'll be looking for your comments and your feedback as well in terms of how you view healing. And then after that, I'm talking about self-care and how it's not always cute or fun or comfortable or cozy, right? And then the last week in August, I'm talking about hair and texturism, right? So you think about the texture of hair, the length of hair. That is a huge factor in this issue of colorism, right? As we know, especially in the African diaspora in particular. I do have colorismhealing.com that I want all of you to check out because that is the hub of everything I do. It's where you can go to show your support by buying a book or ordering a t-shirt or even, sending a donation to Cash App or Venmo at Colorism Healing. I did just launch a Patreon page. So I haven't started putting any content on there lately. Yet. And I only have one tier, but so many people who do want to support more regularly. So Patreon is like a monthly subscription page. And I'll probably be doing like worksheets, affirmations, live classes that have limited spaces. So maybe like 5 people or something like that. But I'm also open to suggestions. So that just launched and I'll let you all know when I actually have the content up and running for that. Anything else I'm missing? Some events that are coming up. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ethel's Club. They're based in New York, but since the pandemic, they have I guess a global membership, but they are a membership service for people of color. It's Black owned, right? And so they create spaces for people of color to practice self-care within a supportive community. And so they've been doing online programming. So I'll be doing a 2-day workshop with them. Hey Jara. Mwah. And they so they offer monthly memberships, I think. And I am, just discovering them myself, right? So they contacted me and I really like what I see. Like I knew when they asked me as soon as I checked out their website and everything, I was like, okay, this is totally in alignment. I think it's so important for people of color to have safe spaces related to self-care, right? Because we know as a Black woman, I could go to a yoga class, right? Or a meditation class in a group of, diverse people and experience an instance of trauma based on, my race or someone else's obliviousness. Laura, who I interviewed last week, was talking about that, like being a part of a community that was supposed to be progressive and woke and spiritual, and how they totally were being racist towards her, right? So I think having those spaces for people of color specifically as well is really important. And then next Friday, I'll be interviewing Stephanie Brown. She's the creator of Do Not Bleach. So she's a photographer and artist. She does lots of things. She's been in one of the Colorism Healing writing contest anthologies before. She has done a lot of visual art pieces talking about skin bleaching and that issue around that specific issue around colorism. So doing like really interesting things. Y'all have to, on my Instagram stories and possibly my Facebook stories as well, I have some images from the art exhibit that I did. And so some of her work is on there. She has like the topsy-turvy dolls and everything. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Stephanie, and she's at Created Brown. So you can check out her Instagram page before then. All right, so everybody doing okay? Let me see if I missed anybody. I've been trying to wave at people. Okay, yes. I'm from Calgary, Canada. Silver Lining Therapy. Excellent. So we actually have a therapist on the line. Hello from Germany. It's late here, but excited for this discussion. Yay. I'm so glad you can tune in. Let's see. Okay, I think sounds powerful. Do not bleach. Yes. So she designed these t-shirts that change color in the sun. I think they either change color in the sun or they change color when you wash them. I'm not sure. She'll have to explain it to you when she comes on. Hey, y'all. Hey, JB, glass half of whatever, Sun Chaser, all of my favorite folks. Jacqueline says, yes, missing safe spaces, right? You know about those safe spaces, Jackie. Okay, so preference versus colorism. Let's get into it. I know everybody who tunes into these things has their own y'all already have your own opinions about this topic, right? And as always, I do want to put out a disclaimer, right? I am committed and dedicated to raising awareness about colorism healing. And it's part of my life's work, but I do not have the final say on all things colorism, right? So not everybody who's tuning in, is thinking that, oh, they're going to learn something new or groundbreaking from me. A lot of times it's just about the discussion, right? So even if I say things that you already know, that you've been knowing, that's totally cool. Because it's still important to talk about it. As long as you've been knowing some of these things, right? The important thing is that we stick to it and stick with it in order to see change and progress in the community, right? So I have 13 things, and I'm going to stop making promises about how long these sessions go. They will be less than an hour because Instagram cuts me off at 60 minutes. But I have 13 points I want to make, and anytime you want to chime in or ask a question, ask a follow-up question, I am happy to pause and see what your thought or comment is on that point. The first thing I'll say in terms of colorism as preference, colorism versus preference, right? Like what the difference is that this question is most often raised in the context of dating and relationships, right? Am I on board? Y'all, let me know if I'm, getting off track, I'm saying something out of pocket. And I think for that reason, this idea of preference, especially in terms of dating, again, it is one of the most visceral forms of colorism. And it's also one of the most visible forms of colorism, right? So all of my, folks who've been in this, conversation for years, we know that colorism is systemic. It relates to health outcomes, employment outcomes, wealth distribution, levels of education, and your experiences within the justice system, right? But for some reason, the issue of dating and preferences, particularly when it comes to Black men, is one of the more visceral and visible manifestations of colorism that dominates a lot of the conversations that people have around the issue, right? And so because of that, I do want to set aside time to address that issue because for many people it is very important to them, right? And it was the source of a lot of their pain or a lot of their trauma around colorism, right? So I don't want to just say, I'm not of the mindset either that it's trivial or it lessens the conversation, because I have heard that too, right? People say, well, if we just focus on dating, then that, really takes the focus off the more important issues around colorism. And so I kind of understand where those comments are coming from, but a lot of people have deep wounds around, this preference versus colorism debate and the sort of rejection that they feel from society. So I definitely want to acknowledge that and kind of talk about that in a way that hopefully is healing and constructive, right? So the second point, doing good for time, is that our preferences can be problematic. right? And so I think the issue is not whether or not people have preferences, because all humans have preferences, but some preferences are problematic. We have to acknowledge that. One example is that there are people in this world, believe it or not, who prefer to not have black neighbors. Shocking, I know, but that's just their preference, okay? They have a right to that preference. I prefer not to have black neighbors, you might hear someone say, okay? Or some people might have a preference to not serve black customers. They might have a preference to just only have white clientele in their fancy coffee shop, right? That is their preference. Hey, Sue. Oh, I love to see people's names pop up that I know in person and offline. Or some people might prefer not to sit next to black people on the bus or not to sit next to a black person on the plane. And that's their actual preference. But we know, right? We have the rational logic to know that's a problematic preference, right? And problematic is a nice word, right? It's a straight up racist preference. And so, yes, your preferences can be racist preferences. Your preferences can be colorist preferences, okay? And that brings me to point number 3, y'all, is that we don't always experience our biases or our prejudices as such. I might have a bias and not experience it as a bias. And I'm talking to this because people don't just ask me what's the difference between preference and colorism, but people want to know for themselves, am I colorist if I prefer light-skinned men, or am I colorist if I prefer light-skinned women, right? So when people ask me that question, it's because they want to know for themselves, have I been colorist all these years, right? And so that's why I'm phrasing some of these points in the way that I am, is that you can be prejudiced and biased and not experience that way. And so I'm going to go back to my examples of racism and say that a lot of people who are racist don't see themselves as racist. It's just a natural way of being. It's natural to me to think that white people deserve to work here over black people. That feels normal to me, right? And so I venture to say, if you listen to who we would consider to be racist people speaking about their ideas and beliefs, they don't see it as problematic, right? And so it's possible for you too, person of color, to be colorist and not realize it. You don't feel it as a problem. You see, oh, this just feels normal or natural. Let's see, silver lining therapy. It's so important we check in with our biases, consciously and subconsciously. These are our blind spots that we need to check in with. Well said, silver lining therapy. Okay, so point number 4. Colorism is not just negative oppression or bias against dark-skinned people. It's also preferences for or privileges for lighter-skinned people, right? And so sometimes people think, well, I'm not colorist because I've never told a mean joke to a dark-skinned person. You don't have to be mean to dark-skinned people to be colorist, okay? Simply being nicer to light-skinned people is colorist, is colorism, right? The original definition by Alice Walker, prejudicial or preferential treatment of people because of their skin color, right? So you don't ever have to be mean to the dark-skinned girl, but if you constantly choose and praise and award and reward the light-skinned girl simply because she's light-skinned, that's also colorism, okay? Our preferences, so this is point number 5, our preferences are often socially conditioned, right? And so I have to keep saying this over and over and over again, because so many people want to say it's just a preference, right? And so that is, I'm going to challenge people who want to say just a preference to think more critically about where preferences come from, how preferences are formed and shaped within us, right? And so we have to, as citizens, be willing to do some critical thinking, not just about other people, right? Not just take the easy way out and do critical thinking for everybody else. and not be willing to think critically about where our thoughts and where our beliefs and where our biases are coming from, okay? And so biases, preferences can be socially conditioned. And so what I mean by that, and maybe silver lining therapists can jump in, but in psychology, there is the concept of classic conditioning, which means that if we are constantly shown images or sounds or words that are paired with something else, we tend to associate those two things as being one and the same, right? So the seminal experiment was that they tested for dogs who were salivating whenever someone brought them their food. That's biological, that's natural to salivate at the smell or the sight of food. But what they were doing was also ringing a bell every time the food was brought out. And so those dogs eventually started to salivate every time they heard a bell ring because they associated it with food. So salivating at the sound of a bell is not natural. It's not just a preference. And so when we are constantly shown images or shown stories or words that put beauty next to light or value and virtue next to white, right? You see where I'm going? Then we seem to naturally think, well, that's what beautiful is. I'm conditioned to see these things as beautiful because every time the word beauty is presented, there's a white person, a white woman in particular. Or every time I see the word feminine, it's an image of a white girl, right? Or every time I see pictures of a wedding pictures, bridal photos, bridal magazines, they're all white women or light-skinned women with long straight hair in those wedding gowns. So that's who I associate with being a bride or being marriage worthy, right? When I watch movies, who's the leading lady? Silver Lining Therapist says, you don't need me, you got it. Well explained. And Brittany, I will call you Brittany. So some of our preferences, right, that can be socially conditioned can be very benign, right? So if you were individually conditioned within your home to associate peach cobbler with grandma, with home, right? That's a type of conditioning that is benign. It doesn't harm anybody for you to associate peach cobbler with feelings of home and nostalgia and family, right? Or associating or having a preference for the color blue, right? Because when you were growing up, your favorite parent always wore blue, right? I know these are like silly examples, right? But we can be conditioned in all sorts of ways, right? Or even phobias are formed in that way as well, right? Why am I so afraid of snakes, right? It's because something happened to me as a child that was very traumatic around that particular issue, right? But those things are not leading to the social pattern of inequality. They're not leading to the dehumanization of an entire group of people, right? And so preference in and of itself is not bad, but preferences that are colorist, or preferences that are racist preferences, lead to the social systemic inequalities. They lead to the dehumanization, the brutalization of entire groups of people. And so that's why we have to be willing to check our preferences. Just like we tell people to check their privileges, we need to start checking our preferences. Kim Baker on Facebook is saying, what a beautiful view, that close to missing home, just a little bit. All right, I'm on number 6, which means I'm almost halfway through, which is good. Good timing. Okay, we're at 4:20. Most likely, I got this point from a TikTok video, right? So I can't cite my source because I have like thousands of comments on TikTok that I can't read all of them. But I do remember reading a TikTok comment from someone who was saying, well, it's natural to date or marry or partner with people that we're in proximity with. It's natural to date or partner with people that we are similar to in various ways, right? And so this person was coming from a place of not really understanding what I was saying. So they were saying, well, it would be natural for, a white woman to marry a white man, or for like an Indian woman to marry an Indian man. And actually I was going through the statistics on dating sites and why like OkCupid or some other dating sites matched people with or show people matches who were similar to them, even if they didn't select it as a preference. And they said, well, you know, research just shows that we're all more naturally likely to partner with people that we have a lot of similarities with, right? And so let me say then that if that's the case, then people who are colorists, right, are the Black men and boys in particular, because I'm keeping it real on this, who say they don't date Black women, are actually going out of their way to do something that's very unnatural. So that comment, right, while it was actually trying to disprove my point, was actually proving my point. That if it's more natural to partner with people that you have similarities with or proximity to, then people who choose to go out of their way to only date white women or to never consider dating Black women, right? When your mother, your cousins, your neighbors, your schoolmates were all Black women growing up, you're actually going out of your way to do something that's very unnatural, right? But also we need to account for the fact that people of color, Black people, brown people of various ethnicities and nationalities are also conditioned to love whiteness. We are all, no matter your race or color in this society, you're conditioned to love whiteness. You're conditioned to love proximity to whiteness. You're conditioned to strive yourself for that proximity to whiteness, regardless of your color, right? And so that brings me to a later point, but I want to get to it now because it's related. A lot of times people's preferences are an efforts to gain social proximity to whiteness, right? Or gain social status in some way. Okay, point number 7. I'm gonna keep it moving, y'all. Let me know if I need to slow down or if I need to stop. Sienna says, hey, I'm late today, LOL. It's okay, girl, you know, it'll be up for playback. So media representations of couples. I wanna ask y'all a question. How often in the media do you see a couple in which the woman, if it's a heterosexual couple, in which the woman is darker than the man? How often do you see that? How often do you see portrayals of a male-female coupling in which the woman has darker skin than the man, right? Think about that. Let me, just polling the audience here. How often have you seen that? How often do you see that? Because the media and, a lot of people can confirm this, conditions us to normalize white or light-skinned female with brown or dark-skinned male, right? I think that is one of the reasons why Black women took such a liking to Michelle Obama, or why the image of the Obamas, Michelle Obama and Barack Obama, was so historical in many ways, because not only was it unusual to have a Black family in the White House, but it's very unusual to have a mainstream image of a couple where the woman is dark-skinned, right? Regardless of what color the man is, it's just rare to see mainstream images of couples with a dark-skinned woman, much less a couple where the woman is dark-skinned and the man is several shades lighter than her. That is a rarity. Not often, rarely, minimal. If they're both Black, almost never, right? And so I've noticed even in greeting cards and billboards on cereal boxes, right? Whenever people want to show diversity, right? We're gonna have a mixed race couple on here, right? Usually the man is Black and the woman is non-Black, right? Very rarely is it reversed where it's a Black woman with a non-Black man. I think Issa Rae and I don't know the guy's character, their movie Lovebirds, right, is a recent example where they are, turning that scenario around. So we have to think about, not only are we classically conditioned, but how? Where does that conditioning come from? Because then we have the power to recondition, right, or to deprogram our minds in some way. Okay, point number 8. This is simple. I posted this in one of my Instagram posts as well, about 3 signs that your dating choices are really colorism. And that's that if our dating preferences are really just, biological attraction, if it's really just biological attraction, then there would be no need to say things like, I only date X, or I only date such and such, right? There would be no need to make such pronouncements. You would just wait until you saw someone and be like, oh yeah, I like this person. I'm going to pursue a relationship with you. But when we make these sweeping declarations, like I don't date black girls, or I don't date dark-skinned girls, or I only like light skins, right? That's not biological, that's psychological, people. That's sociological, okay? That's not merely me seeing someone and being naturally biologically attracted to them, right? So again, we have to check our preferences. If you can make sweeping generalizations about who you think is attractive, without even seeing them. Because we know that one, not all dark-skinned people look alike. And we know two, not all light-skinned people look alike. So if somebody says, I don't date dark-skinned women, it's like, how do you know? Because you could have 10 dark-skinned people in a room and they could all look drastically different from each other. They could all have very different body types, facial features, hair textures, heights, styles of dress, ways of talking, demeanors, all of that, right? Which brings me to my other point. Point number 10 is that coupled with your so-called preference is often a stereotype that is based on racist ideals, right? Black women are too ratchet. Black women are too masculine. They're not soft enough. They're not feminine enough. Or, they're too ghetto, or they have bad attitudes. Or, light-skinned women are just... more, I don't want to say submissive, but maybe some men might say that. Or light-skinned women just seem softer, right? So that's what you call a stereotype, right? To make a sweeping generalization about an entire group of people is not, again, what you're trying to say is a natural biological preference. Those are all stereotypes. That has nothing to do with evolution, biological evolution that says I would naturally be attracted to a person who has a symmetrical face or something like that, right? It's not. It's clearly, very clearly, a stereotype. Hey, Sandra. This point is going to expose a lot. Another sign that it's colorism and not just a natural preference is that a lot of people are actually very attracted to dark-skinned women and will date them in secret, or will have sex with them but will not enter into a serious relationship or marriage with them. Uppity. Okay, Miss Camille. Talking about another stereotype, right? So we hear the stories and we have seen the examples, right, of men who will say, well, I really like you, but I can't, and women say this too, I can't bring you home to my family, right? Like, I am attracted to you, I really like you, but now that I'm ready to settle down and get married, I have to dump you so I can find someone that my family would actually like, right? And so again, that's not about biological attraction. That is about social status. That is about political clout, right? You're choosing your partner based on social status, basically, and who's acceptable socially, right? Not who you're naturally attracted to. I think I solved that problem. Okay. So I think I'll do two more points. Yeah, I'm doing really good on time. Okay, so 12 is to be colorist. No, to be colorist is to be white supremacist. Okay? I don't think people are comfortable being called white supremacists, especially if they are people of color. But to frame it that way, I think, holds our feet to the fire and saying that your inability or unwillingness to recognize how problematic your so-called preferences are is supporting the white supremacist system that despises you as well, right? And I'm speaking directly to Black men in particular, and our Black women who think that, well, it's more important to deal with racism, right? We really need to deal with the race issue first. And now is not the time to talk about colorism. But to condone colorism is to condone the racism and the white supremacy that you claim to be so much against, right? And any conditioning that says lighter is better or that proximity to whiteness is better in any arena of life is also what conditions us to think that their lives actually matter more, right? And so I'm getting into a discussion about why this matters, because it does matter beyond just dating, right? But to the extent that it's okay for you to have negative stereotypes around Black women when it comes to dating is the extent that you will be okay with them dying at the hands of police with no retribution, with no justice being served, right? And so we cannot desensitize ourselves to the humanity, to the value, to the beauty, to the worth of dark-skinned Black women and not think it's going to also impact the way that they are mistreated in the larger system of society, right? The way that they are overly policed, right? The way that we are more likely to be arrested and mishandled and abused than our white and light-skinned sisters, right? And so that's the bigger issue, right? Is that whoever you choose to date, you have to check your negative perceptions of people with dark skin, in particular women. And I know too that the biases and the preferences that people talk about exist in same-sex relationships as well. And that is often parallel to the same stereotypes, right? That darker skin is more masculine or more rugged or more tough, right? And lighter skin is softer or more feminine, or the proximity to whiteness being more beautiful. But the last thing I'll say before I get into my homework and my affirmations, because I forgot to do my homework and affirmations last week for the Q&A, and I really missed that. You don't have to give up your preferences. You have a right to choose to be racist or colorist. So again, a lot of people think that by us talking about these issues that we're trying to convert people, right? Or that, especially since I'm a dark-skinned woman talking about this, right? That's part of the problem too, is like, well, you only are saying this, especially because I'm a single dark-skinned woman, right? I'm gonna keep it real with y'all on that, right? Those three things, being a woman, being dark-skinned, and being single, means that I can't be talking about this simply because it's wrong, right? I must be speaking about this because I'm bitter or just because I'm mad that somebody else got the guy I wanted or whatever. But I think people should realize that it's not, we don't really care if these crazy people date us or not. We don't want them anyway. Nobody's trying to get a certain person to pay attention to us or to choose us or to, pick us out of the group, right? But it's important to talk about it again because we can change future generations. So I really don't care what any adult does, but in terms of their dating preferences, obviously I don't want them to abuse people or that kind of thing. But me talking about it might save some young child from growing up with those biases, might stop the generational curse from happening, right? So if the adults want to be willfully ignorant, right, or, continue to be colorist and racist, that's fine. I'm not interested in convincing people who want to perpetuate these things. But the whole reason I started Colorism Healing was because of what I heard my high school students saying. And so I'm doing it for the next generation. I'm doing it for the young girls who are going to grow up and possibly have to face the kind of ridicule and degradation, right, and demeaning from Black boys in her class, right? And so beyond, it's not a popularity contest. It's not about, like a Real Housewives, you stole my man kind of thing. It's about being able to recognize the humanity in dark-skinned women and realizing that the same perceptions of us that lead a lot of men to say, well, they don't mess with dark-skinned girls, or they're not going to marry a dark-skinned girl, is the same attitudes, the same cultural attitudes that make it so easy for us to be killed and murdered without anyone batting an eye. And so that's why we need to check that. What comments have I missed? What questions have I missed, y'all? Because I did have a little troll on here that I had to pause and break. Very needed. Thank you for these conversations. They are so important and needed. I have a lot to say. Our neighboring. So these Wednesday workshops are not, they're not, what do you call it? Collaborative, right? So we could do interviews at another time, but the Wednesday workshops are really just me chatting with my folks. Let's see. This is healing. Make it available to as many as possible. It's about change for our children. This education is important. So powerful. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with the world. It is my pleasure, Vanessa. Say that exactly right, Missy Camille. This conversation is so important. I love y'all so much. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom. This was awesome to listen to. I'm telling y'all, Wednesdays at 4 o'clock is my favorite hour of the day. Facebook, thank y'all for hanging in there with me. Reminders, Ethels Club workshop. If you want to give it a try, they are doing 1 week free, right? So if you just want to try out Ethels Club and see what they're about, they're doing, your first week is free. And so if you sign up, you can, participate in my live Colorism Healing writing workshop this Thursday and Friday. Be sure to check out colorismhealing.com. Now for homework, I want you to, I'm going to give the homework. I'm going to come back and read these comments because they look good. I want you to assess the imagery that you've been exposed to. So for you, in terms of greetings from Rotterdam, hey there, Sergino, I think that's how you pronounce that. I want you to do an assessment in terms of how you might have been conditioned, right? And so I know a lot of the people watching these lives, who tune into these lives, have already been doing some of that work. So, we tend to be preaching to the choir sometimes on these because we're all like, yeah, check your biases and, don't degrade dark-skinned people. And yes, light-skin privilege exists, right? But even for myself, right, looking at ways that I've been conditioned or constantly being vigilant for any remnants of the white supremacist society that I was raised up in, right? That is so important. So that's what I would assign all of you for homework in this week's workshop, is to do an inventory, for example, of how many shows you've seen where there's a dark-skinned woman who's the love interest, where there's a dark-skinned woman who's the leading lady, right? Just for your own interest, your own curiosity, how many movies have I seen where the dark-skinned woman was not only the lead, but she was also the love? Okay, I want to see these comments. We have, thank you so much for this, Islan Cooley. Yes, Missy Camille, what were your thoughts on the brown skin girl video? I love that Beyonce and her family remain seated or in the background the entire time. So I didn't see the whole video. I only saw clips of it. And I thought it was interesting. So I love the fact that Beyonce is using her platform to give space for dark-skinned women. But I will say, I thought it was interesting that in the clips I did see, her skin seemed a lot darker than what it typically does. And I'm wondering if that was an effort to make her seem, to downplay the differences in skin tone, right? I don't know. To me, it feels a little disingenuous to make your skin significantly darker for that one video than it ever has been at any other point in your career. I'm thinking about specifically the image with her and Kelly Rowland hugging. And if I'm being honest, that did not seem authentic or true to the actual complexion differences between those two women, right? And so I don't know why that needed to be. I think maybe it would have been an even more powerful image, actually, if they had allowed Beyonce to be the more naturally light skinned that she is. I'm not saying she's never been sun-kissed before, right? She's been more tan sometimes than at others, but I thought that was curious. But I do know that a lot of the dark-skinned women featured in the video saw it as a moment of recognition for them, right? And that a lot of dark-skinned women who were watching the video saw it as a moment of recognition for them, right? And so that's, I think, helpful and beneficial. Michelle says, share, share, share. Everyone, help Dr. Webb get her work out to the world. Yay! We are going to raise awareness across the world so that, in the next generation, everyone knows what colorism is, right? Because we're still at a point in time where there are less people who have never heard of colorism, but there are still a lot of people who have never heard of colorism, right? That's true. I was wondering about that. Like her and Kelly look almost the same in some of the parts, right? Yeah. Or maybe she's been made to seem lighter in other publications. Good point. Good point. But even in her videos, I think, or even like her homecoming album, and even on her own album covers and concerts and her own music videos, I've never seen her as dark as she was in Black is King. And again, I haven't seen the whole video, just clips on Instagram. Yeah, she has intentionally kept herself lighter in her career. Says, honestly, so Black Bird says, honestly, I cried watching, but still. Well, yeah, exactly. So that moment of representation, because Beyonce has such a huge platform, for her to feature dark-skinned women so prominently is going to make an impact. It is going to have an effect on the people who are watching it. Okay, so I think I got through all the comments and questions. My affirmation before you leave, because I don't want you to log off before you get your affirmation in. You can recite for yourself this week. I have learned to let go and move on toward my higher calling. Good workshop, Sarah. Thank you. So again, I'm going to repeat the affirmation for you this week. Use it whenever you feel like you need to let go, right? It says, I have learned to let go and move on towards my higher calling. And I use the word learned intentionally because it is work. It's a process, y'all. Next week, I'll be talking about what is healing. I'm really excited about that one. I didn't call this initiative Colorism Healing on accident. That healing is super, super important to me. So I'll be sharing more of my story in that workshop as well. So anyone who's curious to know more about how I got to where I am today, that'll be part of the discussion for next week, okay? Blackbird says, like, there are reports that she has stayed out of the sun while having her former Destiny's Child group mate suntan. Oh, ooh. Yeah, there are a lot of reports about a lot of things. I would hope that that's not true. If it is true, I would also not be surprised. So I'm sad about that. I have learned to let go, yes, and move on to my higher calling. That's right. Asanda Malukani. You were on the live before. I remember you. Thanks, love, the affirmation. Thank you. Currently reading my grandmother's hands, and this is just pairing so beautifully with all that. I'm reading and processing. Awesome affirmation and true. Y'all are the best. Thank you so much. This is my first time having a crazy troll too. So thank y'all for not being bothered by that and, just keeping it going. But hopefully that will not be a regular occurrence. All right. Take care.